This is Healthcare Uprising. We are here to shine a light on the innovators implementing positive change in American healthcare and the patient experience stories, good and bad, that can help others navigate the sometimes overwhelmingly complex American healthcare system. Welcome to the Uprising. We are not doctors and we don't play one on TV. If you need medical advice, consult with your physician or a healthcare professional. All right. Hello, health heads. Welcome and thank you for checking in to this dose of the Healthcare Uprising. I'm your producer in the back, Jeremy Carr, here with your host in the front row, Heather Pierce. So what's on our agenda for today, Heather?
Today we're doing our first human story episode in our first season, and we're speaking with Leigh Call. She's a busy and active mother of 5 kiddos and works full-time as a professional hairstylist here in Flagstaff, Arizona. Leigh is graciously sharing her very personal mental health journey with multiple diagnoses and how she leveraged alternative therapy, specifically ketamine, as part of her ongoing treatment to achieve a happier and healthier way of life to support herself and her family. This is a really beautiful human story that teaches us to keep our minds open to all of the possibilities. And she's also a friend.
Cool. Yeah. Always like talking to the local Flagstaffers on the podcast here. But yeah, looking forward to this one, the other side of the uprising, not just the industry people, but the actual patients and experiencers and, real life stories. That's going to be a big part of what we're doing here. So yeah, without further ado, here is our interview with Leigh.
Hi, welcome to the show, Leigh.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're talking about, again, ketamine therapy, alternative mental health therapies, and Leigh is our what we like to call our human story. So we've had a number of shows already with various folks in the kind of ketamine, mental health kind of world, right? And so really what we want to do is get this kind of human perspective, talking with you today about your experience using or leveraging or whatever the word is, ketamine therapy as part of your mental health treatment.
Yeah.
So very excited to have you here to kind of round out this conversation, which hopefully I think will be ongoing, Jeremy, because ketamine and alternative mental health therapy is definitely something that we're interested in diving into even more and more. So
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So with that, Leigh, would you just share a little bit about your background, how you came to consider ketamine as part of your therapy, and your mental health journey, and really anything that you're willing to share that would help kind of set the tone for this convo today?
Yeah, so I've kind of struggled with depression, anxiety. I've been diagnosed with ADHD and PTSD and all these things. And I've always kind of been someone that's been pretty proactive for my mental health because I would see the difference of when I felt, kind of grounded and well, and then when I felt unwell. And so for years, I've always been kind of on board for ideas of how to help better my life. So for years, I've been to therapists. I've seen doctors who have put me on all sorts of medications and prescribed me all sorts of things. I think in the beginning, the pills, like the antidepressants, my ADHD medication, the anti-anxiety pills, they helped, but then it got to a point where they just kind of didn't help. And then when I'd go back to the doctor, it was just like, oh, well, let's give you more, or let's try this one. And it kind of just started to kind of feel like a trap more than anything. And then same thing with like talk therapy. It was like I'd talk to a therapist and be going well. And then you just get to this appointment where it was like, well, okay, we're at the end of the road and I have nothing much else to offer you. And so then I just kind of found myself in this place of a couple of years where I was just like taking these pills and kind of coping, I guess. It was like, oh, well, maybe I need to go outside more. I need to exercise more. I need to eat better. And I think what really ultimately led me to wanting to step outside of like the norm, we'll say, was, well, first of all, I had a client come in and she had talked to me about how she had taken her daughter, who was also struggling with a lot of mental illness, to the ketamine clinic in town in Flagstaff. And I had heard nothing about it. I didn't know anything about it. To me, ketamine was like a street drug, and that was about it. That's all I knew. I was like, ketamine, isn't that, I didn't know even what it did or why people took it. To me, it was just like a street drug. So when she's telling me that she had taken her daughter to this clinic that offered ketamine, I was just kind of like, oh, that's weird. And then, kind of out of sight, out of mind, forgot about it. Well, I remember waking up one day and it was my birthday. This was 2 years ago. And I just woke up and I was depressed. And I was like, God, like, here we are again. And I think this day was different for me because I started to flash back at previous birthdays. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I've woken up with this depressive feeling for as many birthdays as I could remember. And that's what like really made me go like, okay, like this is getting ridiculous. Like I've been on these so-called prescription drugs that are supposed to help me. I see a therapist, every couple weeks. Like, I'm not feeling any better. And even by then, I'd been referred to a psychiatrist because, that's the difficult thing in this world of mental health is you can't get all the help by just your doctor. You have to be referred to different doctors. And then being referred to a psychiatrist just kind of led me to realize they were there to just give me more prescriptions to take. And so I remember like thinking of my client and her daughter that had gone to this ketamine clinic. And I was like, maybe I'll dive into that. So that's kind of what started my journey into even like considering it or accepting doing ketamine.
Jeremy, we both want to say something. I think literally the fact that you referred to it and what your knowledge of ketamine
Uh-huh.
being like this street drug, right? Like back in the
Yeah.
90s, like,
Hmm.
yeah, it was one of those things that, people, it was like considered kind of a party drug or something like
Totally.
that. And
Back in
Yeah.
the early 2000s, everybody was getting down in the K-hole, man.
Yeah. And
It's such a weird thing to me too that it's now like this miracle medicine kind of thing
right.
yeah.
And for
because it
me,
was such a dirty street drug 20 years ago,
exactly.
man.
Like I've been a professional. I've been in my career for 18 years. I'm a mother. Like I was like, what? I don't do street drugs. Like that's not anything I'd even, consider nor even be interested in finding out about. But in that moment, I was like, I'm a little desperate and I think it's worthwhile, investigating. So that's kind of
Yeah.
Well,
what started my journey
there's a
for it.
clinic, right? Like that, at least it
Exactly.
feels like it legitimizes it too.
Yes.
It's, being administered and managed in a, controlled kind of clinical
Yeah,
environment.
absolutely. That definitely helped. And
Yeah.
and so I did. I just kind of reached out to the clinic and said, here I am. Like, what's this all about? How does this work? And then that's when I met Casey and kind of was given the lowdown of what they offered. And yeah, so that was the beginning of it.
So maybe can you tell us like what is the experience like? I literally have really no understanding outside of what Dr. Casey has shared with us.
Yeah.
Can you kind of dive
Yeah.
into that a little
So
bit? Yeah.
so for me, I will admit because I felt like I was this mother and grown up. I was like I was a little nervous to even find out or even tell my friends or family or anybody that was doing the ketamine. So when I signed up for it, I kind of did a little investigation and I was like, oh, okay, I saw some things on science and watching the ketamine actually go to the part of the brain that lights up the serotonin and watching the brain molecules develop, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, like this is something. But I didn't really want to scare myself away from getting the treatment, so I didn't look up like what happens when you take ketamine, what do you experience. So I just kind of showed up to my first appointment just like, all right, let's go, let's see what happens. And what was really interesting through my experience was the first two, because I signed up to do 6 different treatments. That was kind of what's recommended, is to do kind of 6 in a row every few days to like really get the full potential of it being successful. And my first treatment, I remember I was kind of told like, oh, you'll be able to get some visuals. And I was like, okay. And so I remember my first one, I went in and the visuals I started seeing, it was like kind of pixelated colors, and all of a sudden maybe I was kind of seeing like if you were to stare into outer space. And but what was really interesting is I could only see it on half of my vision. So like this side was just black. I couldn't see anything. It was like only I could only see the visuals here. And what's interesting too is like when I say visuals, it's like it didn't matter if my eyes were open or closed, like you just still see it. But that's what was weird is for half of my vision, it was just black. And I was like,
Okay.
what?
I,
That's
I
kind of
get it.
bizarre.
It split
Yes.
your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
wild.
So you're
so
fully conscious during the treatment?
yes, like it's almost like you can tell, you start to get a little like woozy, a little out of it, but I'd be like, am
Mhm.
I still sitting in a chair? Yeah, I'm in a chair. Can I feel my fingers? Yeah, I can feel my fingers. Like
Oh.
but that's what was interesting. And they put a mask on you. And so I
Mhm.
think that helps too. I'm sure if I took the mask off, I could probably still see the room, but then maybe there'd be some colorful, swirly, pixelated whatever in the room. But with the mask on, my eyes would still be open and I'd still be seeing these things. And by the end of the treatment, I started to finally see some out of the other side of my vision, which was I was like, oh, okay, I can start seeing over there, which to me showed I probably had some type of almost like brain damage, maybe like a concussion or something earlier in my
Oh.
life, that now this ketamine was like making these new pathways. It was crazy. And that
Wow.
might even sound bizarre, but I think that's what happened was I couldn't see the visuals here and then they just started to appear almost like brain waves were like, oh, let's
Wow.
kind of fix this over here. So that was really cool for me. Um, and you kind of go into each ketamine treatment with almost like a just like an inspiration idea, like what can I learn for myself, or how do I find, I don't, everybody probably has their own, but for me I would always go into every session looking for me, which because I felt like there was this old me that was happy, this old me that was, you know didn't have this depression, this anxiety, this PTSD. And so each treatment I'd go into, the visuals would get a little stronger. I think it eventually it'd start kind of feel like I was moving, I guess, like kind of floating or soaring through these colors and pixelated things, but I never actually visually saw anything recognizable. And I had talked to other people that had done the ketamine treatments, even with Casey, that would be like, "Oh, I had lunch with all my friends and we were having conversations." And I think they have like a full-blown dream kind of thing. I never really had any of that. Mine was more just kind of unrecognizable shapes and colors. And I think it was more I would have a lot of just thoughts running through my head, and I'd think about my kids, and sometimes I'd cry, or sometimes I'd think about you know a past loved one that had passed years before, and I'd think about them. And so my actual experiences, I didn't necessarily like the treatment, to be honest. Like and me, I'm not someone, I've never really done drugs. I've never, so for me it'd be about halfway through I was just like, I don't know, I don't do this anymore. Like I feel lost, I feel alone, I feel. And so when I'd come out of the treatments, because it's, they put it through an IV. So eventually the drip kind of runs out and then you just like slowly come out of it and kind of perk up and you're like, oh, I'm back.
About how long are these sessions,
I,
by the
w-
way?
I, would, I think it's about 45 minutes.
45 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. And from what I understand too, is some people come out of it much quicker, some people don't. For me personally, I came out of it pretty quick. I think I even kind of scared them where I came out of it, got up and walked out of the room to go to the bathroom, and they were like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm good."
Wow.
So I think
That
for me, for whatever reason, kind of went through my system pretty quickly, in and out. And so the experiences, I wouldn't say were my favorite. I didn't enjoy the journey, the actual, treatments of it. But for me, it was like a couple days later. I remember like 2 days, the first time I did it, 2 days later, I woke up and it was like just all my depression was gone. Like going to bed and waking up and just being like, oh, I had a great night's sleep. Like it was just
Mm.
gone. So
Like a
for me, it was
switch,
more,
just.
yeah, it was me, it was the aftermath. Like it wasn't the actual treatments. Whereas I think people, from what I've been told, is they'll see someone recognizable and this person will tell them something and it'll kind of just like blow their mind and then they kind of go from there. For me, it wasn't like that. Mine was just, I saw some colors, I felt kind of lonely, I got cold, I woke up, and then a couple days later I'd be like, wow, I feel significantly better.
Hmm.
So for me, that was more my experience.
That's that's a very short, as someone who has dabbled
Hmm.
in his share of psychedelics in my life.
Hmm.
That's a very short and intense kind of trip right there. Like that's some pretty intense hallucinations and experiences you go through, but 45
Yeah,
minutes later it's just gone.
right. And I will
That's
say,
amazing.
yeah, like because I did mostly the just through the drip. And then one time they did do like an intermuscular where they gave me a shot. And
Oh.
that one I feel like I came out of it later. So I think too, most people probably take it orally, I would assume. And that's probably what like extends it. Whereas when you do it, through an IV, they can really control it to be like, and it begins
Mm.
and it ends, which is kind of cool, actually.
Gotcha. That's why you go to the clinic and you
Yes.
don't just buy it on the
I think
corner.
so, exactly. Because
Gotcha.
it was, and like I said, maybe not for everybody. They didn't snap out of it, but they obviously do because people are walking out of this clinic after, like, your
Mhm.
appointment is not that long. They don't want you
Right.
hanging out all day. So that's, and I
I,
didn't feel hungover from it. I didn't. Whereas when I did the intermuscular one, the next day I felt kind of hungover, and I was like, ugh,
A ketamine
that was
hangover.
just, yeah, yeah, exactly. But that was just like my personal
it
experience. But
it's also interesting that it takes a couple days for the real kind of, anti-anxiety, anti-depression part to kick in like
yeah,
that. Like it's not because usually you take the drug and you feel better for a while until the drug wears off.
right.
This you take the drug wears off, and then later on you get the benefit.
Yeah. And I guess for me, like if I was to visualize that, it was like I feel like ketamine and what they've been able to prove through science is the actual ketamine will travel up to that spot in your brain where the serotonin is made. And it's almost like when you trip the breaker and you have to go outside and like turn the power thing
Mhm.
back to on. That's kind of how it felt. It was almost like it's like reminding your brain, hey, the lights are out over here, like turn them back on. And that's what visualize, is that it turns it back on, and then slowly but surely all those new neurons start to connect and start to grow and start to light up. And
Hmm.
probably within a couple days is when mine was like, oh, cool, we're gonna do this, we're gonna make this, we're gonna keep this going.
Did you
So
feel like over time, like so after each session, so you said there were six,
hmm.
that like every couple days or whatever that time
Hmm.
frame was for you, that you felt better and better and better. And by the way, as like I'm thinking about this, and you'll relate to this as being a
Uh-huh.
mom, it's like you sometimes, like with lasts with your kids, you never know it's going to be a last until you
Right.
realize months or years down the road, oh my
Right.
gosh, that was the last time he or she did that,
Yes.
and it hasn't happened Is it kind of like
Right.
that where you just start
Yeah.
realizing like, oh, holy crap, like I actually feel
Absolutely.
so much
And
better.
I guess the only difference is it's like this, like for me once that morning I woke up and I just felt better, I just felt better. And so
You
then
never went back to
no.
feeling
And I
that.
I still remained on my prescriptions and stuff. And so those, were still, I was still taking those, but at least I wasn't waking up feeling depressed. It wasn't just like that constant feeling. And I will say, I remember them mentioning like, oh, you might need a booster. So basically, what a booster is depending personally, I came in after 6 months and did like one ketamine treatment, and then 6 months later did one ketamine treatment. Whereas I think some people will go in every 3 months or something like that. But I will say that there was all of a sudden I was like deep into winter and I was like, I feel terrible again. I feel terrible again. I was like, oh yeah, maybe I could go do a ketamine treatment. And I did, and it kind of did the same thing. It kind of like, woo, like woke me up and was like, okay, I feel better. I feel better. So
Hmm.
it was incredible
Mhm.
for me. You know, like
Nice.
I've taken medications like an anti depressant, anxiety. And after a couple weeks, it's kind of like what you were saying, Heather. That's more I describe like an antidepressant is you're just like one day like, oh, wait, I think I feel a little better, whereas like
Mhm.
the ketamine, I did feel like I woke up 2 days later and I was like, wow, it's all gone. It was a little more intense
Wow.
of a realization to
That's
feel better.
wild.
Yeah, it was really cool. Really cool.
So in the previous episodes we've done about the ketamine therapy
Hmm.
here with Jessica and Dr. Casey, they both mentioned how they usually prescribe, uh, like typical psychotherapy, basically, like with a psychiatrist or something, on
Yeah.
top of the
Hmm.
actual drug sessions.
Right.
Did you partake in that side of it, or did you
I
just
did.
take
I
the treatment?
I actually scheduled that with Casey after. And that was the for me it was like I only did that after one of my treatments because in let me rewind a little bit. So because I think I didn't have actual experiences in my treatments, I didn't really know what to meet up with anybody for. Like I was like, okay, well, I can go talk to someone, but I don't know what to talk to them about after this treatment because I just saw some colors. Like, there was no actual thing to come to mind for me to be like, oh my gosh, I, you know, discovered this, or I heard this, or I felt this, and I need to talk about it. But there was, at the end, I think it was one of my boosters, I had going back to saying I was always kind of looking for myself. I remember I kind of had this traumatic experience with one of the ketamine treatments where I was still looking for myself. And I don't even know what that really meant. I was like, I'm in these colors. Am I going to be behind here and pop out? I don't know. But I just, all of a sudden, I heard a voice that said, no, she's dead. You have to forget about her. And I was like, what? And so I came out of that kind of
Like, who is that
experience.
referring to?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I came out like, "Oh my gosh." And so that was when I was like, I need to talk to someone about this. So that made sense to me why
Mm.
people need to talk to someone. So I had scheduled a session with Casey and I kind of talked through that
Mhm.
session with him and I was like, and he's like, "Well, maybe the old you is dead and you just have to welcome the new you." And
Mm.
that was kind
Like a
of that.
metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think in general, if I was to assume people have that more often, where they'll hear a voice or they'll see someone that says something or reminds them of something, and they have this big, like aha moment that they need to kind of process through with a
Like it's
therapy session after.
uncovered something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that how the psychotherapy part of it is described, though? In terms of its purpose? Because
I,
often people do have these kind of experiences that they need to kind of talk through, or
Yeah, I would
okay,
assume so. Because like I said, I only went to one. And I
gotcha.
was so anxious to go to it that I think I kind of took over and I was like, I need to talk about this. So, I'm not sure I really know the actual general purpose of it. But I think, maybe if I had gone to more and talked about what I'd seen, maybe they'd have some follow-up questions that would help kind of unlock, oh, things for me, probably. But I think also going into committing to the treatments and everything, I was a little embarrassed. I won't lie. When I went in, I didn't tell very many people. And once I started seeing the progress of it, then I was like, oh my gosh, this actually works. So then I was like, okay, I'm telling everybody. I'm telling everybody. And I hope I helped people that are more kind of like me, these moms or these people that never did dabble in street drugs or psychedelics or anything, because once I was more open to, yes, this is helping, and yes, I do this, and being honest with myself, I think I was a little more open to the therapy after and stuff like that. But so,
So do you think that And because I'm kind of recalling a few minutes back, you had mentioned I
Mhm.
was talking to friends and friends who have been also
Yes.
a part or using ketamine therapy as part of their
Yes.
mental health journey. Are you finding that the more you talked about it, other people were like, "Oh my gosh, I do it too," or "I have
No,
done it," or like, what has that been like?
I would refer these people to the clinic
Oh,
and then I'd ask them how it went.
gotcha.
So I cut hair in town. And so like anybody that would be like, oh, I'm feeling, any type of mental health conversation that would come up, whether it was themselves or a child, I'd be like, you got to go do this. You got to go do this. You got to go do this. So
Hmm.
it was more just follow-ups with them. But that's what was interesting is at first I kind of felt gypped, like, what? I didn't get to see my grandma. Like, why'd you get, like some people are like, I had lunch with Jesus. And I'm like, what?
Oh my gosh.
Like, so for me, it was more just realizing, like, for me anyway, I probably had a block. If anything, I probably didn't want to see all that stuff. I was probably a little nervous going in. So maybe that's why I didn't have as many visuals or actual. I don't know, that might have scared the shit out of me, honestly. If like a human person showed up, maybe I couldn't have handled that, and my brain just
Yeah,
knew that or something. But
that
it
would
was
be
more
kind of
that
freaky.
it was like I would kind of send some people there, and then they'd report back. Oh, when I went in, this is what happened, and I was like, wow. So it was more kind of like that.
I honestly think what you saw is even cooler because like you were almost like watching your brain rebuild itself.
Yeah, and that like
That's pretty cool.
yeah, and that's what I mean. Like when I started to feel jealous and then trying to visualize people in my vision, I was like, I don't know if I would have liked that. That wouldn't have made
Yeah.
sense to me probably.
Hmm.
So
And the fact that it was all on one side of your field of vision and then
yeah,
it rebuilt the other
isn't
side,
that interesting?
it really
Yeah,
does sound like your brain was fixing itself on some
I
level and you were
I do.
watching
Like
it happen.
I can't even deny that. Like I was like, that's what happened. Like it just makes so much sense to me. And I was in a very bad car accident when I was little. I probably had a pretty I remember getting knocked out. I'm sure I did have some
Mm.
weird little brain damage. And, that's what I saw. And that's what made sense.
This is
And
like the
And
Matrix. It's so bizarre. I'm
yeah,
literally like, okay, if you've seen the movie The
yeah,
Matrix and they
yes,
have the
that's what it
like
looked
those
like.
wormy things that go
Yep.
through and like attack the the machines, but how I'm like literally picturing like these like Matrix bugs, right? And that's the ketamine, like going into your brain and like putting
Yes.
it back together.
like
It's
little nanobots or something.
yes,
Yes.
right?
And it
Like
was, it was very Matrix like. Because like I said, there
it
wasn't
is
one
so
time that
cool.
I saw something recognizable. It was just like I was in a completely different plane.
And
And I was like,
when
okay, I'm here.
was that a later treatment that you actually had the visual and heard the voice and all that?
That was, yes. So that was my like one of my boosters, probably a year after I had done like the six
See,
sessions.
I wonder if the initial sessions fixed whatever, problem there was in there, and that when you went to do the booster, your brain had recovered enough that you were starting to get those visuals like other
Probably.
people get. And I
Yeah.
wonder if you go back for more, if you would have that, you finally would like see someone in person and like
Yes.
actually
And
get that real event.
I've wondered the same thing. Like since then, ketamine was a really good stepping stone for me to after the ketamine treatments, I was like, okay, well, I ended up kind of meeting like a new spiritual teacher and learning a bunch of different meditation techniques for myself. And now I've been, in a way, it's like I can kind of get myself in a meditation state like I did in my ketamine treatment. So I think that really helped me too. Like it was like it visually forced me into that place in my mind. And since I'd been there before, now when I do my meditations, I can kind of go there on my own now.
Hmm.
So I don't know if I'll ever do ketamine treatments again, just because I think I've learned the tools I need. I think I've gained what I need from that. But I agree with you. If I went back to one, I wouldn't be surprised if I actually had more visuals of, yeah, communicating with someone else or something like that
Right.
for sure.
But you just hit on the best point of the whole thing is that you don't have to do it forever.
Yeah, I
You
don't.
do it just enough and you're done.
Hmm.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
and that was my journey. I'm not saying that that's going to be everybody's journey. Um, But for me, it was a really good stepping stone. And I think one thing I really gained from ketamine treatments was I remember after, like I said, mine was all the after effects that really kind of opened my eyes. But I remember after I had my first few ketamine treatments, I remember being in an argument with someone, and I kind of paused and like took a breath and was able to kind of like step back and like see the whole situation for what it really was. And I was like, whoa, like I kind of, one of those things I was like, pictured my ketamine treatment, took a step back just visually in my mind. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not upset about that at all. I'm upset about this. And I was able to like come back to that situation and break the
Kind of
pattern.
recenter, like on the
Yes, like
fly.
the whole thing. So that's what was cool about the ketamine too, is like there were so many parts, and I don't know if this is just a psychedelic, response. Is I'm not even sure how I got there. It just kind of unfolded for me, and I followed it, and it worked out. It wasn't something I learned. It was just something that I was like, oh, I can do this now, and I started doing it, and it was very helpful.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
So you mentioned getting into meditation, and I say that falls under kind of like alternative wellness
yeah,
approaches. Um, I feel like, especially here in Flagstaff, it's funny when I talk to people in other parts of the world, like urban areas, cities, we talk about walking out in the forest and kind of like, forest bathing and like doing sound therapy. Like it's
yeah.
a little bit more of like a norm in places like this. So I have to remember that suggesting that to somebody like in, I don't know, New York City or something, they're
Right.
like, what?
I'm a big fan of primal scream therapy. That doesn't really work in the inner city. Yeah,
No.
that just freaks people out.
Yeah, it's just alternative therapies I feel are definitely a little bit more I don't know, acceptable or the
Yeah.
norm in like places like where we live. So
Right.
which makes it really special, I think,
Right.
too. So
I
lucky
agree.
us.
Yes.
Um but you did meditation. Is there anything else that it kind of opened your world to that maybe you hadn't considered before?
You know, no. So I think for me, it was like I just found the perfect spiritual teacher for myself. And going back to just, therapy and mental health in general, I honestly think, talk therapy and all those things are really wonderful, but not every therapist is for everybody. And that was kind of the issue I ran into. Is I was more than willing to like I'll do anything, I'll see anybody, but if you don't find that perfect person for you, you might not get as far as you want to get or as far as somebody else. So for me it was like just finally finding the right person for myself to kind of help me and teach me, and has been a huge game changer. And it was, for me personally, it was realizing that nothing from the outside was really gonna solve my issues. It was gonna be me and only me through me. And so, but the path I took, the stepping stones along the way, they all helped me. I don't regret anything. I don't regret being on all these pills for years. And I will say, like, I'm not on any medication anymore. I don't take
I was
any.
going to ask that if
Oh,
you are.
yeah, I'm
That's
completely off
amazing.
everything.
Wow.
And I do believe ketamine helped me for sure, like get on that journey. Is it what completely got me there? No, but it was a very helpful tool that pushed me into that next level of like unlocking and, figuring out what was going on within myself. And so, yeah, it's
And
been,
how long were you on those other medications? How many years were you on meds
oh
before
my
you did the
gosh.
ketamine?
I think when I first got put on like an antidepressant, obviously the original, from what I was told or understand, is the original point of being put on an antidepressant is to be put on it for only a short amount of time, and then you can get off of it. And I think I did that. I think I was on it after having a baby and getting like postpartum depression, and then getting off of it, and it was fine. And then just like more traumas kind of happened within my life to where I was on it and then I wasn't feeling better. So then it was like, okay, up your dose, and okay, we'll try this one. Oh, well, now I can't prescribe you anything. You need to go see an actual psychiatrist to put you on an antipsychotic. And I think I've been solid on some type of prescription for 10 years, I'd say,
Mm.
easily. Yeah. So off and on for 15 years. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And I mean, even
Wow.
just, yeah, and that was, I think, always my goal. I always felt after being put on medication and meeting a psychiatrist, thinking that, oh, a psychiatrist is the next level to really help me, heal these things. It was like, no, unfortunately, I learned quickly. No, the psychiatrist was only there, at least mine, to prescribe me more drugs, to prescribe me more things, to up my dose. And it was like, well, I just felt so trapped for so many years that like, this was who I was, and I was going to be on these pills for the rest of my life. And I was just like, no, I don't want that. I want to actually heal this and get through this. And it was like nobody could really get me there. And like I said, maybe I just didn't find the right therapist. Maybe I just, but like that, I was Mormon for years, and even in a religious standpoint, it was like trying to pray it away, trying to just so many things I tried. And it wasn't till stepping out of my comfort zone, trying the ketamine, realizing like, wow, like there's other things out here that I would have easily said no to, and just kind of surrendering to like what felt right, what felt true, and following that. And yeah, here I am. It's pretty awesome.
It seems, mental health, it's been kind of like this growing thing over the last several years, particularly because of COVID, right? Like the shutdowns
Yeah.
and the loneliness and that kind of like lack of social, support and interaction.
Hmm.
However, that said, there's been like like hundreds, maybe not even thousands, it could be thousands of different mental health startups trying to increase access, right? Because like you're saying, there's talk therapy, there's all these things. It can work for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't work for a lot of people. And so I'm glad to see kind of that emergence of
Yeah.
the mental health support, particularly in like rural communities like ours, where, you have to wait months and months and months to get in to see somebody. Well, it's
Right.
like, I need somebody now. But then you've got kind of, it's just not even just the emergence of the access to mental health, but that people are talking about it. And like
Hmm.
ketamine therapy is becoming more and more mainstream conversation. Like it's not as
Yes.
taboo. Have
Right.
you, since you started, when you first did the therapy to now,
Hmm.
which I think you said is about 2 years ago,
Hmm.
have you seen a big change there in terms of all of
Yes.
that?
And I would say yes on a personal level because I'm the change. Like I'm the one that
Uh-huh.
went from being like, this is too different. This is too, this can't be real. This is just an excuse for people that want to do street drugs to get in I was that person. I said all those things. And then when I realized it wasn't, it was me kind of shouting to the rooftops, like, this works. Like it really does help. And I don't know if it's through that I speaking up about it, then other people were more comfortable to speak up about it. But
Mhm.
for sure, I think as long as, it's years ago, even talk therapy was kind of taboo. And it was like, no,
Yeah.
that you don't do that. You don't do that. And so it's just been very enjoyable to watch like these new, you know, drugs, we'll say these old new drugs
Hmm.
come alive and be offered. And there's a lot of backing to it now. There's actually a lot of people that
Yeah.
can say, no, I did that and I did it in a healthy way and it helped. And so, yeah, for sure. And I just hope
There's a
it
reason
continues.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a reason all these ketamine clinics are starting to pop up and being
Yes,
run
absolutely.
by people like
Yeah.
Dr. Casey
Mhm.
and having it when we did our interview with him, the statistics for like the success rates are absolutely incredible, like
Yeah.
staggering.
Hmm.
So,
And what's amazing too is, like you can be put on a medication and sure it works or doesn't work, but like there's so many side effects too that you have to put into play with. Like
mhm,
it's like, oh, well, it helped this, but now there's this. Whereas something like these alternative treatments like ketamine, it's not something you're taking every day, all day. It's here and there. So there aren't side effects and there isn't this like,
yeah.
yeah, you're trapped to it and connected to it and have to have it. And so
You're
I
not
really,
creating more medical conditions to then be
exactly,
treated by some other pill,
Yeah, you
exactly,
don't need another medication because of the side effects of your medication.
which is so typical.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Because even me,
Uh,
like I said, I really didn't enjoy the actual, treatment, where some people
Mhm.
probably would have. Someone that does psychedelics and stuff is like, no, I actually enjoy being on the ketamine. I didn't, but again, it was fine because it's 45 minutes and I can do 45 minutes and then
Mhm.
have the aftermath of that for months. Like, yeah, sign me up.
It's
I'm in.
tolerable.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I was never a big fan of ketamine, but I don't think I was doing it right either. So,
Okay.
Leigh, I feel like
Yeah.
I'd be like you. I would probably not enjoy it. I
Yeah.
feel
And
like
like,
it would make me, yeah, it's just hearing you
yeah.
talk about it. I'm like, I could already,
that's very intense.
yeah, that,
That's a very intense
Is
45
it?
minutes. If
Okay.
you're hallucinating that hard, that's an intense trip.
Yeah. And you get
That's
in
real deal.
quick. It's like they turn on some music, it's you close your eyes, and then within, 5, 10 minutes, like you start seeing stuff for
wow,
sure.
those
Yeah.
matrix spots are getting to work.
Yep.
Very,
Yeah.
very overwhelming stuff, the psychedelics when
Yes.
you go,
Yeah.
get
And
into
I hear
hallucinations.
people now talk about mushrooms and microdosing
Microdosing, yeah.
and so even
We're going
that
to
right
cover that, by the
there,
way. Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure you are.
psilocybin.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
That's what
actually
I mean. Like
have
even that, I'm like, I don't just like turn my nose up to it anymore. I'm like, interesting. Like it's kind of helped me relax a little bit about being a little more open and,
Mm.
to these new possibilities. And so it's pretty
mm,
cool that people are, because these, I'm sure all these things were made to be helpful. They just didn't work out the way they thought, and then they just got in the hands of other people, and now it's like, no, like, now that you see that these kind of drugs are here to actually help us, and they actually
Mhm.
do help us, like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
You're
amazing, it's
proof of that.
wonderful.
You're proof
Yeah,
of that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
the doctors are becoming shaman now with these things. It used to be you had to
Yeah,
go to the shaman because he knew how to give it to you
totally.
properly for it to do what it's supposed to
Right.
do.
Right.
That's what the doctors are doing now with the ketamine.
Yeah.
And there are clinics in certain states have legalized other things. You can go to Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
and go to an ayahuasca clinic.
Oh,
Mm.
wow.
There's a few states now that have legalized psilocybin on the same level that ketamine
Wow.
is, and there's
Yeah.
actual psilocybin clinics where
We're
you
gonna
go
Okay.
cut.
do a similar thing.
Yes, we're gonna cover that. We're gonna do one of our human stories is going to be somebody who has experienced ayahuasca and
Yeah.
psilocybin for PTSD and stroke recovery.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
very, very, very cool stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's amazing.
Stroke recovery, huh? I
uh-huh.
haven't heard
Well, it's
that
a
one.
brain injury.
Yeah, no, it makes
So
sense. Yeah,
the matrix spots.
Yeah.
yeah watching
Well,
the neurons in your brain form. That's wild. That's pretty
I'm
cool.
right?
now forever calling them matrix spots. Just
Matrix bots, yeah.
um
The
so
ketamine matrix bots.
exactly.
They're
So
real.
I wanna like wrap up this totally enlightening conversation. Thank you for explaining all this. You have answered
Absolutely.
so many questions for me, Leigh. But
Good.
if someone was considering ketamine, like
Mhm.
what kind of advice do you give people, your friends that are now have
Yes.
either are receiving ketamine therapy or have because you've recommended it? What would
Yeah.
you tell somebody?
Honestly, it's more like if you are struggling with something and you don't have the tools currently for it, and there's some new idea, I always just say, like, keep an open mind. And if, say, ketamine is this option and you don't like it, like, ask yourself why, write down your questions, write down your concerns, and then go straight to the professional and say, hey, these are my questions, these are my concerns. And they're going to end up with what my situation, where it was like a lot of my fears and misunderstanding of it, they went away as soon as I was able to fully understand what it truly was. And if it's still scary, if it still doesn't fit right, then don't do it. It's more, I think we're smart enough, humans are smart enough to understand, our bodies are smart enough to tell us, like, for me, the ketamine was so out of range, but once I learned more about it, I felt a yes, and that's why I did it. And I think you can trust yourselves, you can trust your ability to make those decisions, but then also be more open and understanding that maybe saying no to it right away is just because you don't fully understand it. So that's my advice, just fully understand it and go from there.
And everyone who's listening, share this episode with somebody who may be on the
Yes,
fence.
Yeah.
absolutely. And because I
So,
did, I was on the fence. I said no. I was on the fence, and then when it worked, I'll shout this through the rooftops. Like I will. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not. It's not something that I like, keep in secret anymore because it really did help. It really did work. And I am a mother. I am a professional. I am your next door neighbor. Like I am the basic woman that you know or you are. And it works. Like it really was helpful. And don't hold yourself back from getting help that might really change your life because you deserve happiness. You deserve to be helped. And there's things out there and people out there that really want to help you. So just be open to it and follow that.
I love that. That's a great
Yeah.
note to end on. Leigh, thank you so much. This has
Oh, you're
been
welcome.
such a enlightening, interesting, fascinating all the above
Good.
conversation. Ketamine is like literally one of the most, it's like the, I don't know, maybe it might be my word of the year for
There you go.
2025. Ketamine, learn all
There
you
you go.
can.
I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to
it's
going
fascinating.
back and watching all these ketamine episodes in a row so I can
Yeah.
get all this stuff back in my head. So informative,
Yeah.
this series that we're doing.
This is great.
Cool.
And we'll be doing a panel. So we're going to bring everybody back together and have a roundtable discussion. So that's going to be that'll be interesting as well. So we'll just
Yes.
continue the conversation. So
I look forward to it. Thank you guys so
yeah,
much.
All right.
awesome. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Lee.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
All right. Well, there you go. Our first human experience story on the uprising here, and the third chapter in our ketamine series. Uh, quite, quite the thing there. I was really impressed with that conversation. That was her way of explaining what she experienced in the whole thing was great, both the drug itself, but also everything else around it. But I'm going to stop babbling. What are our main takeaways here, Heather?
well, other than the fact that matrix bots exist in our heads,
Yeah.
we now know. At least in my version of my universe, they do. I think the biggest thing is just to literally never shut down your mind to the possibilities for mental health care that are out there. I think historically, maybe even just like up until like the last few years, it's become just to talk about getting mental health care and needing it and just that in general has become less taboo and more of kind of like mainstream talk. But now looking at alternative therapies like ketamine, there doesn't just have to be a magic pill, that doesn't need to be the only thing. And often there isn't a magic pill,
Right.
it is a number of ways to treat, but ketamine, which often has a very very different I don't know, people have a very different idea of what ketamine is because it was like a street drug at one point.
It still is on that level. Like it can still be treated that way.
It could be right.
It's the theme that comes up a lot on the podcast here is these things are tools, but you got to use a tool right to actually build something.
Yeah,
A hammer is a tool, but it can also be a weapon. It can be destructive or constructive.
that is a
It's all
good
a matter
point.
how you use it.
And in this case, obviously, we're seeing ketamine becoming a less taboo thing and a much more mainstream part of people's mental health care treatment plans, like Leigh. So, really glad she shared her story. But I think the other thing too, and she talked a lot about this, and I think it's important that your experience isn't necessarily going to be like somebody else's experience, because we're all just inherently unique humans as it is. So, and we all have our own outcomes. And I think Lee's explanation of, kind of, I think what she was expecting, but then what actually happened during the treatment was different. So, um, anyhow, I think that's just a good point to take away from that.
Yeah, and it actually just made me recall everything you just said there. I recall a couple things from Dr. Casey's interview just a couple episodes ago, episode 3.
Mhm.
I actually just edited it recently, so it's kind of fresh in my brain. Uh, actually talked about the scans of people doing the ketamine treatments. They can see on the MRIs the neurons firing different, like these new pathways in the brain forming. And I just remembered that moment. I listened to that. I'm like, did Leigh literally see in her own eyes what they were seeing on the scans of her brain when it was reforming itself? Because it sounded the same.
Mm-hmm. It's legit trippy.
Yeah, that was kind of trippy. But he also said you mentioned a little earlier in your closing there that there's no magic pill.
Mm-hmm.
He said it in like one of the best ways I've ever heard. He said there is no silver bullet. There's a million silver BBs.
Yeah.
You gotta. There's no one tool. Back to the tool theme. There's no one tool that's going to fix your problem. But if you collect all the right tools and use them all in the right way, like the hammer is part of building the house, but you need all those other tools too that build the house.
Right.
In order, get where you want to be.
Yeah.
So this ketamine series is really
mind blowing.
It's great. It really I had no idea. Like you told me we were going to do a series on ketamine therapy. I'm like, okay.
I didn't know
I
either.
mentioned how I've been doing it. I haven't touched stuff in 20 years, but when I did do it, it was, wrong. I did it wrong. I used the tool the wrong way. But just hearing now what it's actually capable of after that, 20 plus year history it's had as this dirty street drug to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Never think you know everything about something.
That is for sure.
You know?
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. And
No.
ketamine therapy, it's here. It's here to stay. And I think it's just going to grow in use and acceptance. So, we're going to keep talking about it. So I think we'll keep coming back. In fact, we're going to bring all of our interviewees back for a panel discussion around ketamine therapy. So Dr. Casey and Jessica Tracy and Leigh Call, and maybe we'll throw some other surprise guests in there. So I'm looking forward to having that discussion too. That should be pretty interesting.
And if you go to our YouTube, just search Healthcare Uprising on YouTube, we'll have all these different playlists listed out there. So if there is that one series that you really want to focus on, you don't have to go weeding through. Just go to our playlists on YouTube and you'll find whatever series you're looking for.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, I guess that does it. So like I said, we're on YouTube. You can also check out our Patreon, all our pre-release interviews as soon as they're ready to go on our Patreon with all the highlights and full episodes and everything. We try to stay a couple months ahead or so. You can join for as little as $1, get access to all that stuff early. Goes up from there. You can get some merch and whatnot if you join at the higher levels. Access to community chats, all that sort of thing. Where else are we, Heather?
Well, you can find us online at healthcareuprising.com, as well as on all the social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. But also, we're always looking for your stories, whether you're a founder of a startup or you're one of our humans out there that would like to share their personal human experience in healthcare. Shoot us an email at healthcareuprising@gmail.com and we'll get in touch and hopefully get you scheduled and come on the show. But that's it for today. So until next time, keep looking for the good in the world because sometimes it's where you least expect it.
This has been a Shut Up production.
Shut up!